Thank you for being with me today on this series in which we are exploring the church. What is it really, and what are we supposed to be doing? Last time we began to talk about Jesus. We continue this week our discussion of Jesus, our consideration of Jesus. Jesus' ministry and his words say, and again, this is hard to see unless you've done the background study and know the history of the period. But one of the things that Jesus is saying in his ministry and his words is that finally, in his appearance, in his activity, Israel's long exile is over. The long and terrible exile of the people of Judah has come to an end, and God is stepping in blessing. But we need special eyes to see what the blessing is and how it comes. And we use words, we use names for this end of exile and this blessing. Names like redemption, vindication, the vindication of God's ways, the vindication of God's people, and salvation. Unfortunately, over long use, those words have come often to be misunderstood, misread, and what happens is we take content that's knocking around in our culture, we take meanings for those words that we've heard in popular use, and we think that that's what they mean for Jesus, or that's what they mean for the church and the church's teaching. But often, these general understandings, these general cultural understandings are wrong, or at the very least skewed in the wrong direction. And they leave us with a cartoonish version of what salvation is, a cartoonish caricature of what redemption is, and of what the Christian life and the church is really supposed to look like. So we have to be very, very careful to be self-critical and begin to winnow out these meanings that have filtered in from culture or just from people around us and from the way they talk. And we have to learn to begin to look like a laser at the actual words that Jesus says, the actual things that Jesus does, and the way that Jesus is preached in the New Testament. We have to pay very close attention to the New Testament and its way of understanding and handling the Hebrew Scriptures, its way of preaching Christ, its way of directing us to Christ. Because so much of the time, what we say is Christian is much more about ways of thinking we have inherited that have really very little to do with Jesus. Jesus announces the end of exile, God's redemption, the vindication of God's people, the coming of God's salvation. But don't assume that you know what that means. Don't assume that you know what that is without paying very careful attention to Jesus. As theologian Hans Kung wrote in the 1970s, Jesus of Nazareth is a quite specific person who said quite definite things, who did quite definite things in a very definite time and place. To understand what salvation means, to understand what redemption is, we have to give some time and attention to understanding who this definite person is and what's the meaning of what he did and said in that time and place before we make a move to say what it means now for us in our time and place. Thank you very much for your attention.